Of course, an action film, in many times, is asking for propulsion, forward motion from the music.
It's really synonymous with action scenes. There's a real tension to the original.
I would say that films like Diva, for example, would have no sense without the music.
You want to convey the impression of great power and density with lots of action, and yet not completely overwhelm the soundtrack.
I wanted to be very much more about emotion, about characters in this particular sequence than about action.
I don't know why people always have to die to have that sense of freedom, you know, why everything has to be a Russian tragedy.
It ought to be a journey of really great beauty. Because it was the last journey, therefore they were seeing everything that way.
Action movies appear to be all about speed and excitement, but the inspiration for the composers and directors always comes from an unexpected source: character.
A movie that is an action movie has many elements that are non-action. The psychological elements, like they're as important.
You don't necessarily just want the music to be flailing away in the background. You do want to bring in other aspects. And in something like Speed, where you might bring in the character of the bus as an aspect of the chase, composers are always looking for things like that they can draw on to make the music more meaningful than just saying there's a 3-minute chase going on here. The character, either of the person being chased or maybe their motivation for the chase, I think is brought into the music and weaved in as a character in the music along with the action aspect of it.
In an action film, if it is possible to lean on character or lean on the emotional content of what's going on, would be a very good way to go, because basically music is about emotion. It's not about action.
Bernstein's score for The Great Escape is totally grounded in the personalities of the escapees. Director John Sturges was a master in creating a gripping narrative and well-drawn characters.
He was the most extraordinary person to work with, and because of his process. He was not interested in you reading the script. What he would do is he would bring you into the office, and he would tell you the story of the film. And he was the most thrilling storyteller I've ever met. And I mean, you just floated out of the office, you know, on his telling of the story, and you were halfway home by then, you know, in terms of what to do.
Right. You go first, Eric. I'm staying here till we get moving.
The story is about a bunch of guys who decided to tunnel out of this prisoner of war camp. I mean, it's a true story and a very sad story. I believe on the orders of Hitler, all the escapees who were rounded up were shot. I mean, it was a very tragic story.
The key to the music of The Great Escape was a difficult one, really, to decide on for several reasons. One thing, as you look at the film, you suddenly realize that a lot of the people we get to know and are interested in die. Not a happy thing, obviously. So the question is, what should the overwhelming theme be? And I sort of am the character that Steve McQueen plays. This is sort of indomitable, kind of nutty American, you know, who is never worried about anything. He always thinks everything is going to be all right, and he's very jaunty. And that's where I got the feeling of the theme from.
After the escape, the characters split up, and a long sequence follows that cuts between their various adventures and ultimate fates.
You all right?
Yes, have fun.
In some instances, I indicated other themes for characters. In particular, the Donald Pleasant-James Garner relationship had a kind of wistful theme of its own.
The
In the chase sequence, he does play each character when you have them on the rowboat, you have them in the plane, you have them on the bicycle, and then Steve McQueen on the motorbike. Each time it cuts to one of the characters in their journey to escape, it is sort of playing their character and then their development as a character.
The way you intercut music, for instance, when you have a situation in which you're cutting from character to character, that is also a technique thing. I think it's actually one of the things I do quite well in film, because I make it seem fairly seamless. You have to figure out, how are we going to go from this situation to this situation, and they're rather different, and find some graceful way to get there.
As the scenes change between the chase and the non-chase music, he mainly uses rhythm as an aspect, and the challenge is to get in and out of that by either having the rhythm slow down or by holding notes longer, and he does weave in and out constantly between the different character music and playing the different aspects of the drama.
I mean, that's what composition's really about, you know. I mean, the best example of what a real composer does is, let's say, the first movement of Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, you know. He writes, dum, da, 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 dum. Well, any one of us could have thought of that, actually. Any one of us could have thought of that, but not what he does with it for the next 8 minutes. He takes those few notes and weaves an 8-minute movement out of it. And that's what composition is about. And that's the job, if you have to treat a theme and a motion picture, is what you can get out of the theme. One of the things you do, I mean, compositionally, you might write the theme out, put it up on the piano, and you take a look at it, and you start to analyze all the things that can happen with it, upside down, sideways, and that sort of thing. And basically, that's what musical composition is about, is what you can do with the theme.
Action has been treated differently over the years. If you look at the chase scene in Bullitt, which is considered like the classic car chase of the 60s, it's unscored.
In Bullitt, many people praises the music I did for the chase, and I didn't write any music for the chase.
Everything you're hearing is sound effects. The music is before and after. So it always depends on what the director is looking for.
If I put music, then you have to sacrifice sometimes what is more important, the music or the sound. Each one of the cars has a special sound, a specific sound. The audience could define which car is coming. Probably Bullitt was one of the first movies of this genre, and I feel the genre became very, very popular, and sometimes I cannot sleep at night thinking that I am responsible for the demolition and destruction of so many cars and trucks, and, you know, it was a little bit excessive.
I think today, by and large, action scenes are scored. I think there's more music in today's films than there were even 10 or 15 years ago.
I like to score action sequences very precisely. I like to I like to find the tempo of the editor's cutting, and the better the editing of a sequence is, the closer I can lock myself to it. And I like to make it feel, at the end of an action sequence, that the editor cut the scene literally to my music, as opposed to the other way around. And if I did my job correctly, I'll make it look like that. I'll make it look like they took a piece of music and they'll cut the scene to it.
The music for Brian De Palma's film Mission Impossible was the result of several composers' work. No reworking of the cult television series would have been complete without Lalo Schifrin's original theme, and Danny Elfman cleverly worked it into his atmospheric score. Meanwhile, Larry Mullen and Adam Clayton of U2 rewrote the theme for the main title and produced a massive hit.
The main theme was like a logo. I remember the producer said to me, "Why don't you write a theme for each one of the characters?" I said, "No, that would be wrong, because they are all working for the mission. It's like a paramilitary operation, and one theme should bind them together."
Well, I think it's really synonymous with action scenes. There's a real tension to the original. Also, I think it has that kind of Latin feel as well, which is sort of exotic. And you can, you know, every time you hear it, you kind of imagine the match being struck and the touch paper going off. It's very evocative of an action movie kind of soundtrack.
I was a little too young for it to have made an impression. However, I was always aware of the music, because the music turned up in lots of different things, and it was on. There were albums out at that time with that music on it, so I was very familiar with the music, and also aware that it was to dance to. It was music to fall over to.
We wanted to make it something that would be played in clubs. We wanted it to have a dance element to it, and that required shifting the time sequence, which is, you know, it's a technicality, but it was in 5/4 time, which you can't actually dance to. It's irregular, but it's what makes the melody so good. But we shifted it back to a kind of 4/4 time signature.
And that's what I did. And I wrote in odd meter, in music, it's not too known, 5/4. Maybe that's why now the new versions are in, for people who have two legs that are equal, because the way I wrote it, they cannot dance it.
So 5/4 is dun 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 dun. In 4/4 it's dun 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 dun. So I mean, it's when you hear it on the radio, it's hard to tell the difference. And one of the reasons is that at the opening section of the song, the sample is in 5/4. And then it goes into 4/4. So it's kind of, sometimes you don't actually realize that's actually changed over.
I wanted to keep the memory of Lalo's lovely melody alive. And so it was always in the back of my head, yet my instructions were very clear from Mr. De Palma, was to create 3 distinctly new themes and have a score that stands up on its own. So all these laws and rules and regulations were floating around in my head. Very easy if we wanted it just to be campy all of a sudden, but I was attempting to do it in a way that was paying homage to a great theme and use it in a really good way and not let it become campy.
The helicopter chase in the Eurotunnel is the scene that presented Elfman with the most complex integration of theme and action score.
I approached that scene like I normally would, trying to figure out where the dynamics, where I'm building to, and how I'm going to get there. So I kind of create myself a roadmap first. In that roadmap, there are 2 places where I was also going to drop in Lalo's theme. A question of how much of it to use, and Mr. De Palma and I went through quite a bit of arguing on how much is necessary to play of a recognizable theme and deliver the juice of it, and at what point it starts becoming hokey. Dropping right into Lalo's theme for 12 bars or however many bars, and then slipping it back into score without the audience even being aware that it stopped. To me, it was the best of both worlds because I was able to keep the recognition and yet go back to scoring, which had a lot more drive and energy that I was able to deliver with the theme, and then yet save the last 4 notes, go right back to it, and make it feel like that was the culmination of the whole thing.
When you see the piece and when you hear the music, it is seamless and incredibly effective and very powerful. And I really envy that ability and that musical knowledge to be able to do that.
My team, he did it very well. It was the helicopter scene and all that. He made it very symphonic and very big. As a matter of fact, I made myself a version, symphonic, that sounds very much like that before. I mean, for my concepts of film music, people want to hear Mission Impossible, so I did something. Instead of a small television orchestra, he used a symphony orchestra, and that's right. I mean, he did it well.
A lot of what I'm doing is the percussion and the stuff, because at the end of the day, I love percussion. I'm into it. That's my own personal thing. So I create my own percussion sounds, very often which are unique to the movie. In fact, this is a sound. You talked about Mission Impossible with I did specifically for Mission Impossible. And used for created a whole different group of sounds that I was using for the one I just finished. And so half of my work, as I'm putting stuff together in the arrangement, is actually also laying down the percussion and or synthetic tracks, which will stay in the score. And I spend a lot of hours up here playing all my own percussion parts and creating my libraries. And that's my own personal performing pleasure, still involved with the whole process. And at the end of the day, I can hear my own work all throughout the scores.
Mark Mancini's energetic score for Speed was innovative in its approach and sound. He didn't just concentrate on the action on the booby-trapped bus, but took his inspiration from all the characters. And he didn't take this to mean just the people, but even the bus itself.
This being my first movie, and I knew that what I was trying to achieve was an enormous amount of energy in this first movie. And I thought I needed somebody who really could, would help me doing that, and who's trying not to bully me in using a more conventional score.
Ma'am, up to the right. Okay.
What worked about that movie is that you felt something about the 2 main characters. You felt for the people on the bus too. But you really felt for Sandra Bullock, right? And I guess if you're a girl, Keanu Reeves, you really felt for those characters. You wanted them to make it. You wanted them to get out of this thing. And the music needed to do that. The music needed to be about heart, and it needed to be about emotion.
The bus became like a character in the movie. I mean, obviously, 70% of the movie takes place in the bus. Mark did a fantastic job on helping, this whole incredibly long bus sequence, remain excited. He really changed the tone the whole time, and when each time they find out something that is the tone changes, the tone of the score changes, and so it's not like a constant drive, like I said earlier. It is like, it's like how the bus feels and the people in the bus. That's what the score tries to represent a little bit.
Mac, you gotta get me out of here!
They're on the bus, which has a bomb planted, and they are on a brand new freeway, the 105, by LA Airport, and it's not completed yet. And they're heading on this, realizing that there's a gigantic part of the freeway that has not been built yet. And they're going too fast, really, to stop in time. They can't go below 50, or the bomb will explode, so they can't stop. So the only thing to do, of course, is to, forge ahead and jump the gap, which, for a bus, generally most buses don't jump gaps like that.
you have to try to convey to the audience almost the impossible. How you can make them believe that this bus can actually jump across a gap, you know? Not one bus in the world can do that. So that's a pretty hard thing to be, the hard thing to fight. So how do you make an audience believe it or at least buy it for the moment? And the only way to do it is by believing in it yourself.
But what I tried to do was make it emotionally melodic. You know, not just angst, not just momentum, not just rhythm, but I put a melody, da 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 da. That gave it a little bit of heart. Sort of try to make you feel for these people, not just about this bus that's going to jump the gap and isn't going to make it.
So the only thing we have to do now is tell the audience a little bit at a time, it's almost there. We're getting closer. See the gap? It's right there. A little bit more, and prepare them very gently, actually, for the jump.
Everybody, hold on!
Then, of course, as it gets closer and closer, I started to get campy with the music. I got into the low brass, and I almost made it a little bit like, you know, dare I say cartoon-like, but, you know, very action hero-like.
So after that, you can, it's a big, large exhale, basically, you know, and it's what the audience actually does in the theater, and the music does as well. It's like, it just sits and just let it just roll out till the end of the sequence.
You okay?
Yeah.
You okay?
I'm okay. I'm okay.
Basically, the concept of that score was to take an orchestra, take all of the orchestral percussion, replace all of the orchestral percussion with sounds that were created on a bus, which was metal banging, hubcaps, telephone wires being hit, telephone poles being struck. Whatever would sort of be what this bus was going to have to go through in this movie, I wanted to use for my orchestral percussion section. So when I was done writing a lot of the cues, I got rid of the timpanis, I got rid of the drums, I got rid of the instruments that were providing momentum in the percussion section and replaced them with all this metallic sound.
It was really, really cool. And basically, we did a whole bunch of sessions just with the percussion. And everything was kind of based around that. We did that first and then added everything else, which is kind of probably a very different, but not very, you know, common way to go. Because normally in score, you get the big orchestra first, and then you maybe add some little, you know, some little percussion here and there. We went almost the other way around.
So just trying to bring that bus into the orchestra, it was really fun. It was really kind of a cool thing to try to do. Because part of that creative process, that experimenting, is what makes the score married to that picture and makes that picture have a score unique to itself.
Another composer who creates his own library of manipulated sounds for action pictures is Brad Fiedel. He used these to build up pulse-raising scores for James Cameron's Terminator films.
I'm always looking at films, sort of trying to hear inside, asking for. And of course, an action film, many times, is asking for propulsion, forward motion from the music. And what I played with, you know, in the Terminator films especially, was bizarre time signatures, and usually odd ones, so that if I was in 7/4, you felt like the music was falling forward. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. It sort of started again before you're in your mind. You expected to hear the 8 and then the 1, or you know. And if you hear 7 and all of a sudden the 1 hits again, there's a little. It helps you fall forward with the action, move forward with the propulsion of the film.
The Brad Fiedel music in Terminator 2, a lot of the times what it's doing is it's driving it. It's giving you a sense of time and all this percussive stuff that's driving the scene forward and giving it almost additional speed.
But again, Fidel's main motivation was character. He and Cameron wanted to bring out the human qualities of the film. For, in contrast to Terminator 1, Schwarzenegger's character is positively humane, and the plot revolves around him protecting the boy from the evil Terminator T-1000.
When I first approached the scene, I felt the truck comes over and you have this big lumbering thing coming after. So he was like, the truck was the boogeyman, you know. So I did this, I had this element in the music that was really, really heavy. And Jim looked at it and he went, no. He said, this is about a scared mouse. This is about the boy. He said, I risked my life. Nobody would shoot it. I got down on, there's shots in that where the camera is down just about at the cement and just going, you know, like that. And he actually operated that because nobody else, it was so risky, nobody else wanted to operate it. He said, well, you know, being Jim, he said, I'll do it, you know. So he got down and shot it, and he said, I risked my life for this scene. The whole point I was going for was what it felt like to be this scared little mouse of a kid trapped in this space. So he wanted a much faster, higher kind of composition than I had done. Now, there were places where I was able to return certain shots back to the truck, but for the most part, he wanted this feeling, your heart beating in your chest. And we had the whine of the motorbike to deal with. We had the sound effects of the truck. So there was this place where a lot of what comes through, at least in the final mix, is this, you know, is this very high pitch stuff. For T2, 90% of the sounds came from acoustic places. One of the reasons that I wanted to go this way in Terminator 2 is that I had a belief, a deep belief, that this human quality of the film and the emotional quality of the film would be supported by that. In other words, that somehow that without even consciously knowing, that the audience would feel, and I would feel in creating, that these sounds had an intrinsic humanity or warmth to them, almost regardless of what I did with them. I wanted the T-1000 to have a life, a musical life, and yet I knew that it shouldn't be lyrical, obviously, and I couldn't think of any instrument it should be. So I ended up developing this sound that actually came from taking the sound of a brass section, a sample of a brass section that was doing this, and taking it 2 octaves lower and making a loop. So whenever the T-1000's on screen, there's this. Probably you wouldn't think of it as music, but it was an important part of the score. And I don't remember what the sound effects people had done at that time, but I know that when we mixed it, we had to make certain choices so that the subtlety, because Jim really loved that signature for the T-1000, so we had to make space for it. You know, if a car motor was running, he's getting out of a police car, that might have to be lowered a little bit so that you could hear this subtle sort of thrum of what was sort of inside of him.
James Cameron has a great, intuitive, wonderful sense of that give and take, and always moving, you know, featuring one thing, pulling that back, something else, always using this evolving, fluid style and using contrast to a great extent to make it seem huge.
And I think that's one of the things he brought to action pictures, this idea of just the visceral, you know, where he puts his camera, how the music is. It's all just trying to put you on the roller coaster, as opposed to watching someone on the roller coaster saying, ooh, that's a scary roller coaster. Will that character get hurt on that roller coaster? No. He wants you on the seat going, whoa, just straight ahead. He just wants you going, feeling the tension of it.
A well-balanced mix of score and sound effects is crucial in action movies, and Terminator 2 is considered to be one of the best examples. Gary Rydstrom was key to achieving this. He's one of Hollywood's top sound designers with many Oscars to his name.
I personally don't mind and enjoy the movies that blur the distinction between music and sounds. I think that's a wonderful thing when appropriate for the movie. There's no reason the audience isn't taking in a movie separately. They're taking in the whole experience. They don't care if a tonal designed sound that's taking them inside somebody's head or maybe being sort of mystical was created by the sound effects department or created by the composer. They could care less.
Music is part of a continuous spectrum, just like the rainbow of light that we experience is a continuous spectrum from violet at one end to red at the other. Sound, the way I think of it and work with it, is a continuous spectrum from music at one end to dialogue at the other, with sound effects somewhere in between. So the key to integrating all of this, which is that concept of sound design, is making sure that all of these various elements work together with each other and don't step on each other's toes.
I think directors are making clearer choices in a given moment of what should be featured in the soundtrack. And when that happens, it's great, because there's certain moments I'll say to a director, if you really want to hear this sound effect, let's not put music here. Let's give the audience clearly the sound effect, and then 20 seconds later down here, let's bring in the music here and have it featured item. So those choices, I think, are being starting to be made more and more carefully, so it's not just a barrage of noise in the end.
The biggest issue in action films is contrast, to me, to make moments of rest and to always change.
Action scenes are, by their very nature, usually very loud. Everything is being pushed to its maximum.
Walter Murch was the sound designer on the groundbreaking Apocalypse Now. The film is an outstanding example of the care and painstaking attention to detail that's taken to create a perfectly balanced soundtrack.
The elements of integrating these various tonalities of sound in an action scene is probably that element of design at its trickiest, because you want to convey the impression of great power and density with lots of action, and yet not completely overwhelm the soundtrack. The scene in Apocalypse Now where the helicopters are landing on the beach and the Valkyries music is playing and people are being shot and explosions are happening, there's just like this tremendous range of things going on. And when we finally got all of those elements together and pushed the faders up and listened to it, it was certainly loud, but it seemed to have diminished in power in some way because it had all just collapsed into a big ball of noise. In those kind of situations, in fact, probably in many situations, the most you can ask an audience to think about at any one time is 2.5 things. So in any 1 5-second, I contrived that really only 2.5 layers of sound would be being presented to you. The music and the explosions and maybe a little of the voices of the people, but no helicopters, no small arms fire, no fire sounds or other miscellaneous sounds at this moment.
Spotted a large weapon down below. We're going to go down and check it out. All right, this is Mark 5. I'm rolling.
It seemed to me then that that put the sound right at this interesting balance point between density and clarity. It certainly felt dense, this tremendous stuff, but you could hear all the individual things in it. Whereas if I added a whole other layer, the layer of fire, for instance, suddenly there were more things going on, but there was this diminishing. If I only had 2 layers going on, it didn't seem quite dense enough. So I was always it's like a juggling act. You're trying to keep 2.5 balls in the air at any one time. The Chinese symbol for forest is 3 trees. You draw 3 little pine trees. The symbol for tree is one of these trees. Now it's up to the Chinese. How many trees does it take to indicate forest? 16, 40, 2, 5? Well, 3 seems to be about right. So there's something magical about the number 3 that says you are now getting into a new unity out of the parts. So in sound, I try to remain just inside of that most of the time. Sometimes I let it all go, but not for very long. When I get in those situations and I get panicked of, oh my God, things are falling apart, I suddenly remember 2.5, and that tends to help me begin to sort things out.
Diva is about the pursuit of a young postman by several factions, but the film is very much about character and emotion. So Vladimir Kozma's score is cultivated by psychology and atmosphere rather than the action. Moreover, as the character's love of music drives the movie, the score is unusually prominent.
Films like Diva would have no sense without the music. Diva is a film about music, about loving music, being in love with the music.
Évidemment que faire la musique d'un film où le sujet tourne autour de la musique, c'est un privilège pour un compositeur parce que la musique prend une place prépondérante et ce n'est pas uniquement une musique d'accompagnement des images.
La musique de Diva, elle participe évidemment au succès, d'abord parce que elle est un peu au centre de l'histoire. Je vole une musique, donc déjà elle fait partie de l'histoire même de la trame.
It's this theft that leads to his pursuit, with the chase music reflecting his state of mind and crumbling world.
It's a turning point of the film. For the first time, the postman is endangered seriously. He has been spotted by the police and is chased. And in order to escape the police, he's going to ride his moped down into a subway entrance.
J'ai essayé de sortir des habitudes, des poursuites ou des choses conventionnelles qu'on fait parce que dans l'ensemble du film, tout ce qui était musique d'accompagnement, j'essayais de trouver une couleur et de rester dans cette couleur originale et insolite parce que la façon de tourner, tout le film sortait de la convention.
I had this idea because of French Connection. That was the subway involved in French Connection. But it was some kind of, let's say, an intelligent, creative reaction of a penniless director versus a rich director making a film in America. I was impressed by this chase in French Connection, and I knew that I had no means to do the same with my film. So I had to put my protagonists into a very funny and surprising and original situation.
Il fallait quand même une musique qui rythme les images parce que c'est des images rapides avec une mobilette qui court, donc il fallait donner un rythme. Mais Donc j'ai pris le parti de faire un mélange. Ça commence avec une ponctuation rythmique faite sur des tablas indiens sur lequel il y a un dialogue de sitar vietnamienne. Ensuite, il y a toutes sortes de différentes percussions mais très discrètes et très délicates, qui viennent enrichir un peu cette poursuite.
Music in this scene is very important because it adds to the speed and the skillfulness of the guy to run the motorbike. So it's some kind of a rolling, running rhythm that gives to and there is also the tabla, which is also giving some kind of a drumming sensation to the scene. It's very simple, in fact.
Il fait ressortir par la musique un petit peu de ce qui se passe en réalité chez lui, c'est-à-dire une sorte de... Le rythme se casse dans sa vie, à ce moment-là, il est poursuivi, c'est contre son gré, ça va contre lui, quoi. Et la musique est un peu, à ce moment-là, effectivement, un peu à contre-temps, à contre-rythme.
He's right, because at that moment, the music is showing his feelings as a character who is lost, have no place to escape, no place to be.
Le but, c'était de faire quelque chose qui sort de l'ordinaire et en même temps qui colle au personnage et à la scène même. Je fais partie de l'école des compositeurs de musique de film qui pensent que la musique est un commentaire poétique, une espèce de parfum qui ne doit pas souligner trop l'image ou l'action d'un film. Si un film est bien construit et bien écrit par les scénaristes et bien tourné par le metteur en scène, ils n'ont pas besoin que la musique souligne ce qui est déjà à l'écran. Par contre, elle peut avoir un commentaire, une présence supplémentaire, indépendante, qui peut être très très intéressante et très importante, de la même manière qu'un texte.
Hans Zimmer's score for Thelma and Louise is a haunting commentary on both the characters and their flight from the police. And by the time he worked on the film, he and director Ridley Scott had established a good working relationship.
Ridley doesn't really tell me what to write or he doesn't even tell me what he expects. You know, he wants to be surprised. Look, they're paying me a lot of money to come up with some ideas and not just to come up with some pretty notes, to be part of the filmmaking process.
To me, music is very visual because it evokes pictures. In my head, I listen to his music and don't even have to shut my eyes. I can see the pictures. And so that's why I know, in many respects, I can talk pictures to Hans. He responds to pictures. Thelma was kind of tricky to just get a grasp on just exactly what it was. How do you characterize a film like this, which is about two women who are essentially rebellious to their environment and their way of life and what they've settled for?
I wanted that longing in the tune right from the word go, right from the beginning, something unobtainable for them, and a bit rough, you know, a bit sort of boisterous, and definitely not sort of the girly sentimental thing with a bunch of strings going.
It became apparent to me as I was location hunting that it ought to be a journey of really great beauty. Because it was the last journey, therefore they were seeing everything that way. And I always wanted this kind of thematic for them somewhere in there, which would have a kind of rather sad note to it, but also a kind of romantic note to it, and certainly an emotional yearning.
When I was a kid, there was this blues guitarist. I was a huge fan of Pete Haycock from the Climax Blues Band. And I used to slow the records down and learn how to play his solos. And when Ridley said he wanted to make a movie, you know, sort of road movie about America, I thought, I can phone up Pete and maybe he'll come down and play some guitar.
This guy came in, Hans and this guy worked together for a few days, and they came up with what was this theme that I then found was really emotional, very evocative of the film, and very evocative of the journey.
Their journey ends with them trapped on the edge of a canyon with no way out.
And it's very dark and very gloomy and very inevitable. It's like you can feel, you know, the one thing you're not supposed to do is foreshadow things, but I on purpose foreshadowed very much that it's all going to end badly. Finally, they're trapped, and now things are going to go horribly, horribly wrong. And just like Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, there's only one way out for them. And it needs to be some sort of a very intimate yet glorious moment, you know, and it can't be a downer. And at the same time, they're going to die. And so it has to reflect all these different emotions. It has to reflect all these different things.
Turn your engine off and place your hands in plain view.
We're sitting on the edge of that place was called Dead Horse Point, which is now called Thelma and Louise Point. It's in Moab in Utah, and they say, let's carry on. So then you shift gear into the music that you see at the beginning of the movie, and that's why it starts to make sense.
You strip away everything you don't need and just keep try to keep the essence of that tune intact.
Let's not get caught. What are you talking about? Let's keep going.
There is no way out. What are they going to do? Go to Mexico and be boring waitresses or something like this? You know, after that adventure, where do you go? So I didn't need to play that. I didn't need to play that tension there anymore. So I could play all that earlier foreshadow, and then let them lift off gracefully.
And that's why it works on an emotional level. Just watching it that there was oddly enough quite emotional. I got a stab. Once again, I haven't seen that for like maybe 6 years.
I mean,